All right. No, tell you what, I'll introduce you. I'll say Paul, John, Dave.
Yeah, that's
just pointing in people's directions, mate. Because my
text is on the screen. Just ask the question. What do we think the reg number is? I'll then push the arrow and we'll move along.
All right.
Okay. So I've pushed the live button, but I have no idea.
Yeah, people are coming in.
How it works again?
People are coming in. Attendees are coming in. There we go. Right. You've got your participants box open, so you can see who's here. Your chat, so you can see who's chatting.
Yeah, I can see me, you, and Dave.
Yeah, if you click on the other side, attendees, the number's getting bigger.
All right.
Yeah. Hi, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
Evening.
Really sorry, but my Street Fighter music isn't working now.
Sad face.
I'm just so annoyed.
So for everyone who's here now, this is another one of this is another Paul Meaden creation. In that the idea, the driving, and the PowerPoint has been created by Sir Meaden. Answering a question that we have asked many times in other areas. And so Paul's going to be behind the steering wheel and it's going to throw things in our directions, and we'll talk about it, and then we'll look at you guys, and you can obviously have your inputs as well.
Yeah, and if you do want to put anything in, put it in the chat window. You can put the question and answer thing in if you want, but we're not going to get to that immediately, so that might get done at the end. So use the chat window if you want something that's more sort of immediate.
Yeah.
So let me see if the polling is there.
I think it's fair to say we've heavily debated how we're going to present this, but what I think the mindset behind writing this was to enable people to maybe develop a different way of thinking and mapping things, the way I kind of learned just by doing this so much on Eat, Sleep, Repeat of it, and I found it worked for me. So hopefully it's not the only way of learning it, but it's a good way that I learned how to learn basic principles and the law. So hopefully everyone gets something out of this. And yes, I'm a Street Fighter fan, and I wanted to just jazz things up.
I think looking at the Discord, the Zoom controls, I think you are in charge of polling, Paul. All right. No. So if you wanted to do any polls, I think that's function is for you, because I don't see it.
All right. Well, I'll try one, but I think the rest of them, depending on how long it takes, we'll try in the chat.
There's two polls. One is an EICR code. One is an EAWR code, and I only put a number of regulations on that, looking at the ones that were available in the presentation. So we'll see how it goes.
Okay. Yeah, this may just spectacularly fail.
You never know.
But if it's okay, we can forgive ourselves. This is just about us sharing our knowledge. So when do you want to go, Dave?
Crack on, man.
Okay, right. Hello, everybody, literally everybody watching. Thank you for giving us some of your time. As I said earlier, this is going to be an opportunity for learners, people who've been doing this for 30 years to just sharpen the pencil when it comes to BSM 671, the big blue book, and also the law. We keep referring to this book here, which is HSR 25 as the electricity at work regs, although it's the guidance. And then obviously the big blue book is just here. And that's what I've used to create this presentation. So before we get on, if my computer works. Oh, look, now the music plays. There you go. Right, so there's a bit of, it's not going to stop now as well. Right, hang on, let me just turn this down. It never works when you want it to work. So for everybody who remembers, and if you haven't, or you're watching us on YouTube, whatever, me and Dave did an asset management webinar where what I was trying to do was impart some of the bigger picture of how infrastructure managers and our clients manage infrastructure. Now, obviously, it didn't really cover the domestic installers, the domestic dwelling, but this one will help and does apply to the domestic installer, the dwelling owner. And so what we kind of did was in that webinar, which is also available on YouTube, please watch it. We discussed this a little bit, how when an electrician does his work, even though he may feel he's at the bottom of the food chain, he's very much not. He's the enabler for his own destiny. So, and that sounds really corny, but clients want to get rid of risk. Electrical infrastructure is a risk, and I've spoken about this. I've done webinars on risk before. If you as a contractor can help manage risk for a client and inform them very well and very easily at minimum time and cost yourself, you help a client reduce risk. That can only lead to one thing: money, cash.
Yes, and the asset management webinar, I believe, is on both the E5. It's on the E5 one as well, isn't it? On the YouTube and Spark Ninja one. It's a couple of hours, and it is me just listening to Paul rambling on, using all of his, because you have a diploma in some asset management.
I have a diploma, advanced diploma in asset management, as well as certificate in asset management, because I wanted to understand all the big words.
There was a lot taken from that, and as you've just hinted there, if we are contacted by a client and the client is just told that they need to have a pass, and that's the only information that they have, if we can then add the value of our work to say, well, actually, this will then indirectly or directly even result in this, where we can translate this directly to specific legislations, which just arms the client with more information and more awareness and then more ability to control the risk. It's just about pushing it a little bit higher than giving them a document which they may have no real understanding of what to do with. Because a document just to 7671 gives them some information about a standard that doesn't necessarily join the dots as to what that means to them from the perspective of legislation and compliance. And what we're covering here kind of just adds some extra travel, some extra workload that you can offer to clients to give them more value.
It's a roadmap from this to this, basically. That's what this is. And the roadmap, in theory, will enable you to earn money. Now, I know a lot of electricians go, I never ever pick up the regs book. I can't really do much about that. But if you're a company owner or a self-employed man, the more you learn, the more you earn, has been always what I've said. But more importantly than just that, you guys, if you can see on the screen, if it's changed, you guys need to learn how to defend yourself. I'm not talking in the Street Fighter context, obviously, even though the background infers it. I'm talking about defend yourself if the worst case scenario, and please, please don't ever use the term "it'll never happen to me." Because I know Paul, I know John, I know Dave have all read on the HSE website precedences and court case papers where someone has lost a limb, there's been an entrapment, there's been an electrocution, Louise Taggart, Michael's story, you know, the sad death. You need to be able to defend yourself. When you are out there selecting and erecting an electrical installation, whether it's an extra socket or an extra light, you need to think, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? And can I defend my decisions? Okay. And what we're going to do is teach you, I suppose I should have put a bingo montage around this instead of Street Fighter, but you need to learn to defend yourself. So number 29, we've said it in podcasts, we've said it in previous webinars, it is the go-to regulation. Now we're going to come on to that before we get started, but what I want to do is just give you some very simple, quick tips. Okay, now within the Electricity at Work regulations, which is free to download, the statutory law or the ACOP, which this is the ACOP HSR 25, it's free. Within that, there are a number of absolutes. You'll hear legal eagles and people in senior positions if you're a commercial industrial contractor. If you speak to any health and safety advisors, they'll talk to you about absolutes. Okay, now what we have here is a list of very simple numbers that are regulations or parts of the Electricity at Work regulations, which are effectively absolutes. Now for Sparks, you don't really need to memorize them, although if you're a QS, if you're an engineer, you will, over time, applying your knowledge, you will pick them up. You will remember number 8, number 10, number 4, etc. Most Sparks really learn 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 really
a lot of
well.
training and a lot of information hovers around 13 and 14 as we always debate live work. And then we'll mention 16 with competence, but we often kind of bypass 8, 9, 10 and so forth because we go straight to there. But as Paul says, all of this is very relevant.
So they're absolutes, nice, simple one word. And the reason being is within health and safety, there are terms, practicable versus reasonably practicable. And effectively, practicable is an absolute. You shall do it. End of. You're doing it. Whatever it is, you're doing it. It's your interpretation. But for instance, let's use earthing. Earthing, you shall do earthing, regardless of whether you haven't got the budget or not. If you haven't got the budget, you're not doing the work because you can't comply with the intent of these absolutes. Now, if it's a reasonably practicable regulation, then that's the balance of time, cost, etc. You know, am I going to spend £10 million to do something? No, not really. I'm not going to spend £10 million just to change a socket. It's not reasonably practicable. And there's a key indicator for people who are trying to learn this, and it's the use of the word shall. So a little bit of homework for any of the learners watching. If you download a copy of the Electricity at Work regs or HSR 25, when you're skipping through these, get My favorite, the yellow highlighter pen of doom, and just go through the regulations, and where you see the word shall, highlight it. And what you'll find is it maps to the list on the screen. Okay, and when it's a shall, you are doing it, you are considering it. Now, a lot of electricians don't really memorize or learn the electricity at work regulations, and that's fine. What I do recommend is you learn this one, back to the defense. Okay, and the defense, John, do you want to tell us about the defense, mate?
Yeah, the defence, this is number 29. So in any proceedings for an offence consisting of a contravention of regulations, all of those, which is basically all of them, it shall be defence for any person to prove that he took all reasonable steps and exercised all due diligence to avoid the commission of that offence. And when it says he, it does mean she and they and all that as well.
It's a bit sexist, isn't it? It needs updating.
Yeah, that's how laws are written.
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, so that's actually what it says, but in more sort of normal language. Regulation 29 applies only in criminal proceedings, so you're basically in the court, someone's with a white wig on in front of you. It applies a defence for a duty holder who can establish that they took all reasonable steps and exercised all due diligence to avoid committing an offence under the regulations. And this comes down to, can you prove that you did those things?
Can I just, I mean, sorry if I'm going to ask the question you may ask Paul. Mr. Skirm, I know you're muted. Can I ask you a question, sir? You've worked as an expert witness. You've done work in these situations. When we see the words all due diligence, how would we kind of describe that in practical terms of what kind of work would be done?
Well, you'd be expected to provide such things as documentation to prove you had done suitable design calculations. If we were talking about a BSM 671 installation, you'd be looking for the installation certificates, and they would be put past somebody like me, and I would be looking for anything wrong in the electrical installation certificate, down as little as a tick in the wrong place to discredit you. If I was on the prosecution side, and if I was on the defense side, I'd be trying to justify that the tick was just a clerical error. Or if I was working for the court, I would have to be factual and say, well, it's simply wrong. The barristers are the ones that will be trying to trip you up.
So it shows the importance of delving deep into 7671, but also beyond it, looking at the manufacturers, and that's where due diligence really comes in, isn't it?
For example, you might be prosecuted because a piece of equipment that you had fitted had failed and set the place on fire, and it would come down to the fact that perhaps you hadn't fitted it in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. If I had to do an expert witness report for the court, you would be looking at, I would be looking for the facts to prove whether or not that had been done. You would be looking for any evidence that you have that you can lay your hands on for your defense team to prove that you had.
Which shows the importance of not just doing a job and then throwing an EICR, or sorry, an inspection. So it's about having that manual, all the literature, traceable evidence of all of your due diligence at that point. Do you think?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And if you're designing an installation and you're going outside the like the on-site guide, keep your design calculations. You don't have to deliver them to the client with the certificate unless you want to. For commercial and industrial jobs, it's arguable that under CDM you should probably hand your design calculations over. But just keep them anyway, because you can use them as a defense in Reg 29.
Yeah, I find it interesting that if anybody hasn't realized watching this on YouTube, the word shall appears. It shall be your defense that you took all reasonable steps. All reasonable steps. It's really important because that means different things to different people. But a court sometimes will just cut through all of the kerfuffle and technical garble and say, did you provide fuse protection? Did you provide an RCD? I don't need to be an electrician. Did you bond it? Did you earth it? Did you do this? Did you place outreach? Did you prevent the children or whatever playing around this stuff? They'll ask common sense questions. So you need to, when you're selecting and erecting, consider the external influences, consider compatibility of the equipment, consider that DC immunity. all that stuff that was under your charge, under your control while you were selecting and erecting. And I'm going to carry this on because there is a debate as to, I have heard electricians say this doesn't apply to me. Okay.
Wow.
And yeah, no, I have. So I wanted to, just before we get into chapter 13, I wanted to cover regulation 3. Okay. Because this is the one that covers persons on whom the duties apply. Dave, do you want to take us through these key bits?
Okay, so 3.1 here. Let me just move my visual right. So we're otherwise expressly provided in these regulations, it shall be the duty of every employer and self-employed person to comply with the provisions of these regulations, insofar as they relate to matters which are within his control. So that's something that we can discuss. And do you want me to read the smaller bit? The mines, we excluding the mines from this?
No, don't worry. That's just there for clarity, but no.
All right. And then, so that's just the mines, which is after 29, basically. And then, so that's employer and self-employed. And then we have employees while at work. So the duty of every employee while at work to cooperate with his employer so far as necessary to enable any duty placed on that employer by the provisions of these regs to be complied with, and to comply with provisions of these regulations insofar as they relate to matters which are within his control.
Well, this is where I don't think there's enough clarity. Employers and self-employed, they're highlighted in yellow, very, very clear.
I make a fairly good living, mate, working with companies, trying to help them understand where their controls are.
Yep.
Because when companies have people at work, and at work, they need to operate machinery, they need to operate production, they have to access panels to reset, and they have some electricians who are level 3 trained, level 4 trained, but then they have people who do cleaning of conveyors and stuff who may have to reset. Understanding how to control, emphasis of the word here, your workplace can be quite complex in some areas. You know, this is, again, I'm going to add another document. We've mentioned HSR 25 without going off on a tangent. I use documents like HSG 85 to assist with this, which is all about safe working practices. Another free to download document. Sometimes companies do need assistance in understanding how to control their workplace.
Well, let's do a quick plug there, because I think you've done webinars that cover this in ridiculously great detail. I remember one Saturday morning, it was, we're only going to do an hour or two, 4 hours later.
4 hours later.
But just to everyone listening, before we crack on with this, it's really important. Matters are within your control. So if you're a domestic house basher, when you were in that person's house and you were at work being paid, there are matters within your control. That is you selecting and erecting a new consumer unit, an extra socket. When you leave that house, it is no longer under your control. So electricity at work regulations does not apply to my home. But if I do work on it, I'm technically under DIY. But if I was paying myself or somebody paid me to work on their house, I would have to comply with the electricity at work regulations. If I went and did an EICR, I would be under the guise of electricity at work regulations for the duration of that EICR. Once I'd finished and handed over the paperwork would become one of those records which is called upon in Regulation 4. Okay, we are not saying, for the avoidance of doubt, that Mr. and Mrs. Janet and John Joe Bloggs have to comply with a piece of legislation that they don't even know exists. This is about electricians, electrical installers, and engineers understanding when you're at work, these matters are within your control, and it's every employee at work. So it's really important that you remember that. Right, moving on. Let's get into the bread and butter of it. So for everyone who has a copy of the wiring regs in front of them, if you're watching this on YouTube or on our live webinar, what I have is a very simple thing that I've always done in my regs book. I'll hold it up to screen and it's very tiny. But what I do is in the column next to the regulations, I just put a little number, which tells me what I think the allocated law, the associated law or legal requirement of the electricity at work regs. This webinar is purely about chapter 13, which is 6 pages. We're going to cover it over two evenings so that we can give it reasonable amount of time.
Let's just add chapter 13, fundamental principles. The rest of parts 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 blow up the requirements to comply with that chapter 13. It's not, you know, so
it is the starting point. It is what I say to apprentices. If you learn chapter 13 in a very proficient manner, you will understand and know how to use the wiring regulations. and be able to select and erect in a fairly confident and competent manner. More importantly, if you remember 29 and 13, you will be reasonably confident and competent to be able to say, I know what I know what I don't know, and I can defend myself if asked. So let's get into the first regulation. So if we open up chat 13, if you don't have it, don't worry, we've put it on the screen. So regulation 131, protection for safety is the header. 131.1, general requirements. And it states the requirements of this chapter are intended to provide for the safety of persons, livestock and property against the dangers and damage which may arise, in the reasonable use of electrical installations. The requirements to provide for the safety of livestock are applicable in locations intended for them. So it's saying that there's special locations as well for farms, which is in chapter 7. Yeah. Now, immediately reading that, what would you guys think is the corresponding electricity at work regulation for that? So if anyone wants to put it in the chat, I'm not going to do a poll on this one. I'll do it while you guys are talking. But for this one, what do you three guys think the corresponding electricity at work regulation would be for that? Putting you lot under pressure now, aren't I? You should have said, get your copy out, boys.
I'll go through mine now.
What do we think? 4, 5, 8, 10?
So how many do you want to put in it?
Yeah.
Well, I'll throw this first one.
We talk about here protection for safety. It's such a broad area.
So I've already put it up. So number 5.
You're going to go with 5.
There are a lot of people reading this going, well, what the hell's number 5? Strength and capability of electrical equipment. And it states no electrical equipment should be put into use where its strength and capability may be exceeded in a way to give rise to danger and your defense is available. Now, really interesting, no equipment put into use where it may give rise to danger. Let's go back. The requirements of this chapter are intended to provide for safety of persons, livestock and property against dangers in a reasonable use of installations. So to me, there's absolute synergy.
If I'm looking at regulation 6, adverse or hazardous environments, which would also do that, are you saying you could do that as well?
Yeah.
Or would you say that would then create an issue with the strength and capability, so it would become 5 in the end? Or are you going 5 and 6?
No, not necessarily. This is not what we're saying is doctrine and right. What we're trying to do is demonstrate a method of thinking to almost effectively link Janet and John. So if we're saying here strength, capability, give rise to danger, and we know that's in the regulation, we should be able to see that there's synergy between them. So what you've just said, regulation 6, which is obviously, adverse environments, that would be the line at the bottom, which is livestock specific. So that's more adverse environments, farms, etc. So you could say 5/6. These are not 100% right. And as you'll see, as we go through these, there is more than one. But what I want to do is just introduce you to the concept of what we're doing here. So we'll go through the reg. We'll go through what we believe, or what I believe. This is my opinion, and it's not maybe correct.
Let's see if anyone's added anything in the thing.
This is how I've learned.
Both John and Paul have shared links in our chat for accessing these publications, and for YouTube, we'll add them in the description.
Cool.
I'll just comment. Paul Burton was talking about, I think this is where we talk about how you provide your due diligence. He's put installation, check sheets, red line drawings, photographs detailing what exactly you handed over to the client.
Yes.
Yeah, because who knows what happens to it after you leave it. Yeah, basically you're bottling your own due diligence at that point. And it's true that you have a stamp to say this has happened at this point. There was an example. A YouTuber just recently did a video where he put up a panel or a board in a domestic, and he was waiting for the supply company to put in a new supply. And in that few weeks, like 4 or 5 weeks, another company put in a supply to a pumper site and completely hashed it. It looked awful, and we had this chat the other day, and we talked about the idea of using like seals or something to protect your board. And then Mr. Ward held up he's got his own kind of ways of sealing a board for his own kind of warranties and stuff.
The holographic.
It's all about, as I say, defense, protecting yourself, protecting your work, protecting the outputs of what you do. And, you may need to think about capturing that and considering what could happen even weeks after you've done that work, and that you may end up being accused some level of liability for.
You're never going to know which regulation you're prosecuted under until the papers drop on your desk.
Yes.
And the judge's gavel comes down and says guilty. Bang.
And this is why, Paul, I'm trying to get people to see that this is how my brain gives complete synergy between the fundamentals of law and the fundamental principles of the wiring regs, because I found my brain and my decision making in a very confident place, because with everything I say I want to do, I'll go through what regulations are, and then I'll go, have I exercised all reasonable steps? Have I done all due diligence? Do I need to do more? Okay, I need to commission more of a design. I need to commission more of a survey. I need to commission this to understand the risk to me, my employer, my employees, etc., my colleagues. So that's why I do it. But the principles still apply in a domestic house while you're selecting and erecting, you know, an installation. You're not going to put a 1 mil on a 45 amp breaker.
But this is, again, and this is why the word control is so important, because the second you go into someone's home and you do something, whether you're putting in a temporary supply, whether you're going to change a board, or you can do any adjustment, if you've taken ownership of some level of change in the way the system was operating before, and you've changed it, then you're going to be having to have control over that, even in the domestics.
Indeed. Right, Dave, next one.
Where are we at? Oh.
131 protection for safety.
131 protection for safety, basic protection. Okay, so this is straight from 7671.
Yeah, it is.
All right, so basic protection, person's livestock be protected against dangers that may arise from contact with live parts of the installation. This can be achieved by one of the following: preventing the current from passing through a body of any person or any livestock, so blocking it off, and limiting the current which can pass through a body to a non-hazardous value, such as we may use with IT systems. Yeah. So a form of basic protection, and that goes back to the other standard that basically says if it's dangerous, you shouldn't be able to touch it, or, you know, when you do touch it, it shouldn't be dangerous. Like electric fences, you can touch electric fences. Why are they not dangerous? Because of the controlled current. So that's a form of basic protection.
So I've launched a poll.
You've launched a poll?
I have at EAWR Reg. There's quite a few options there, guys, and there's no right answer to this, because this has got multiple answers, because the first one was just a...
It's a single choice poll, so just choose the one that you think most strongly for, all right?
Yeah. We're not going to do this for every single one. We'll do this one round at a time. Everyone will go through a reg and we'll see how it goes. Interesting. Oh, some interesting results coming in. Oh, okay.
There's another point on this I'll just make in that the button number 2 on that, limiting the current which can pass through body to a non-hazardous value. RCDs don't do that.
No, they do not.
True.
That's a common understanding, but although you've got a 30 milliamp RCD, it doesn't limit the current to 30 milliamps. It just means that it's limiting to a certain duration of time in that it trips. So there we go.
Yeah, John, stop being awkward.
I just realised I can't vote.
No, we can't vote. No,
we can't vote. I remember Kirsty moaning about that. Yeah, we can't vote.
Okay, so should we end the poll?
Yeah, if you're happy that some people have had a go.
Yeah, we got 100% answered. So the poll result will be coming up now, and I will share the results first time I've done this.
There we go.
So can you see that?
I can see that, yeah.
Okay, because I can't.
Okay.
It basically, everybody's gone with 33% regulation 7, 8% regulation 6, 17% regulation 5, 25% regulation 4, and 8% regulation 8, which was earthing. Really interesting. So I'm now hopefully going to click on this, and this was my first thought. Regulation 5. Okay, again, persons and livestock protect against dangers that may arise from contact with live parts. The protection should be achieved by one of the following: preventing current, limiting the current value to pass through the body. So I initially thought it was 5 because of the strength and capability of electrical equipment. No electrical equipment should be put in use where its strength and capability may be exceeded to give rise to danger. If I go back, rise to danger could be current passing through the body. So immediately I thought 5, but then I thought, what about 7? So 33% of everybody, yes, well done. And the 17% that did regulation 5 as well, well done. You can argue there's a merit to every single one of them answers, and that's not a bad thing, because there's no wrong answer to this. Regulation 7, all conducts in a system which might give rise to danger, suitably covered with insulating material. Isn't it amazing that the electricity at work regs requires basic, simple things like insulated material, protected so far as reasonably practicable, you know, that cost balance, to prevent danger, or have precautions taken where appropriately they're suitably placed, placing out of reach, all those basic principles, so far as reasonably practical to prevent danger. You could argue 4, safe system of work, which 25% of everybody has. said. So some very interesting results coming from this, and I've no idea how to stop sharing this. So hang on one second.
You can close it. Yeah,
There we
but I
go.
mean,
Hopefully
you can
that's
look at the
closed.
one problem from many different angles. You know, from the perspective of, you know, the protection that was not afforded as would be required by 7671, and then the risk of that, by the physical thing that wasn't there, such as the lack of an installation that may be needed. You know, so you can actually come out of this with a couple of these.
Yeah, I mean, if you went to 4.1, all systems shall at all times be of such construction as to prevent so far as reasonably practicable danger.
Mm-hmm. It is basic. Right, moving on to 13122, chaps.
Fault protection.
Mr. Ward.
Oh, right, Mr. Wood.
Okay, fault protection. Persons and livestock should be protected against dangers that may arise from contact with exposed conductive parts during a fault. And you've got three choices: preventing a current resulting from a fault from passing through the body of any person or livestock, limiting the magnitude of the current resulting from a fault, and limiting the duration of a current resulting from a fault. And in connection with fault protection, the application of the method of protective potential bonding is one of the important principles for safety.
I am going to, what do we think on this one, guys? I'm not going to do the poll
I'm
on this
taking
one.
pretty much the same as before at the moment.
Yeah. What you'll find, guys, is there is a lot of eat, sleep, repeat on these, because there are some fundamental core ones, but this is fundamental principles. So naturally, you're going to get a lot of repetition.
But it goes without saying, there's only a few regulations in the electricity regulations. There's lots of, you know, lots of summary here.
But there is some curveballs.
Yeah, but any simple observation can go straight to one of these common ones, 4, 5, and so forth.
So again, just mapping out strength and capability of electrical equipment. If you read the protection for safety, fault protection, again, making sure the equipment affords you the level of safety, that it has the adequate strength, the capability to provide that fault protection, regardless of what the equipment is, because when it's all connected, it's a system. So that was just another quick one. But what about also fault protection earthing or other suitable precautions? I'd love to know what the other suitable precautions are, because earthing is fundamentally what we do, to be perfectly frank.
Yeah.
Precautions shall be taken either by earthing or other suitable means to prevent danger. So if I go back, fault protection, EAWR, ADS, ensuring we have potential zones, preventing a current resulting from a fault passing through the body of a person or livestock, limiting the magnitude of current resulting from a fault, limiting the duration of current resulting from a fault in a non-hazardous time period. This to me is a 5 and an 8. Basically.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, the whole protective measures you can't ignore that 8 is all about how you achieve, either you utilize the earthing or you use as another suitable means, such as separation of earthing, but you identify the risk of earthing. We talked about this in the first regulations, that it said about earth and that you needed to kind of avoid that. And obviously we've changed our trend over the years. We've jumped right on it and we've utilized it because of the abundance of earth.
Well, a lot of electricians will go to installations and they'll find that the DNO fly lead connection onto the old lead sheath is disconnected. So they don't have that earthing. So if they make the alteration in addition to the installation, they don't have the earthing, you could argue that the protection for safety fundamental principle here for fault protection cannot be achieved. We're not going to debate the rest of the book. This is those fundamental basic rules to map to the basic rules of the law, which is the electricity at work regs.
But
Right.
it's amazingly important to realize the actual bigger picture of just utilizing a little bit of chapter 13, translating that to determine that actually an issue with EAWR 8, for example. And then what does that mean? Well, that's a legislation now.
But more important than that, if we go back to electricity work regs and we go back to that reducing risk for your clients, when you're coding an EICR, if you can map to even these fundamental principles, and having done this sort of study, you can map it to a statutory law, you can then provide a very powerful report that can say it's unsatisfactory to the requirements of law, which then tells an employer they're very much at risk. From a business perspective, if you tell them that and you provide a quote to fix it, then it's a winner-winner chicken dinner. It's money for you for doing your job well, for knowing the regulations well, for knowing there's a link between the law and the regulations, and providing a world-class service. And you'll never be out of work. You just won't be, because there are too many clients that have failing infrastructure that need competent.
I mean, there are many clients that will throw this document next to the one with patch testing, next to the one with thermal imaging, next to the one with disease, next to the one, and they won't understand necessarily the concept of the content of this work. If you can do some kind of front document that references the legislation and just outright says non-compliance with law, that may just give them that little understanding and that understanding of what value they've got from your work now.
So when I was learning on the railways and I was developing and growing as an engineer, I used to take BS 7671, and I might put the pictures on Instagram. I used to take 7671 and I'd list out a lot of the requirements. I then did another table with all the railway standards and the railway requirements so that I could compare what 7671 had against the railway requirements, see if there are any gaps. But more importantly, people would listen to railway standards more than they would the wiring regulations. But what I didn't realize at the time was I was leveling up my approach to understanding multiple standards and an understanding of how important these safety principles are. And I would then put across very convincing arguments for doing the job the right way. And then also teaching yourself the right way. We're moving on to the next one, 131, Protection for Safety. Mr. Skirm, protection against thermal effects.
My turn, is it? Okay, so 131.1, protection against thermal effects. The electrical installation shall, and obviously we have that word shall again, be so arranged that the risk of ignition of flammable materials due to high temperature or electric arc is minimized. In addition, during normal operation of electrical equipment, there shall be minimum risk of burns to persons or livestock. So which EAWR reg, there we go, 5.
Yeah.
Sorry, I muted myself there. I think it's a 5 myself.
Yeah. So you got a 5 because of strength capability and the
strength
outcome
capability.
of it.
Absolutely. We know electrical installations can get warm in their normal operation. We know RCBOs get warm in their normal operation. We know switch rooms sometimes aren't cooled. They're red hot. And that's fine because some installations are designed to operate at warmer temperatures, 30+ degrees.
Yeah.
Not a problem at all. But for me, strength and capability over the duration, the life of the installation is very important.
Also, connections can, incorrect selection of connections over time or the utilization, that will then create the same problem.
Well, Dave, me and you have both personally seen vibration on terminal connections caused by vibration from external to the building.
Yes, we have. We've seen what can happen.
We've seen what can happen. Yes, on Instagram.
And just a bit of vibration, but over time,
So again, that strength and capability is really important. Your defense is available. It's ironic that number 5 is one of the few regulations that says 29 is available. It's a message. Do it, but your defense is available if you don't do it. So you better have taken all reasonable steps if you don't follow 5. So 5 is a common theme. It's like a golden thread through this, but there are other regulations we're going to get onto and some absolute curveballs that I've thrown in on this as well. Right. Also, as well as that, we just mentioned it, connections. Regulation 10 of the Electricity Work Regulations covers connections. How much of a fundamental is this connections? Where necessary to prevent danger, every joint and connection in the system shall be mechanically and electrically suitable for use. Interesting word, mechanically there, Mr.
Well, that's actually worded in 526. It will say that it'll have to consider the electrical and mechanical, suitable for electrical continuity and mechanical strength, I think is the word in 526.
So that's where we might run cables through a piece of conduit to a final point of connection with maybe a small piece of metal copex.
Quite often
allow for vibration and stuff like that.
Yeah, but quite often the electrical continuity is fairly observant. Your sizing, your rating, but the mechanical strength with regards to understanding the proper utilization of the electrical system over time, that can easily be misunderstood if electricians aren't taking good assessment of general characteristic actions. If they're not properly doing that.
I mean, the other thing to think about there is mechanical strain on a terminal connection. Is it pulled too tight? Is the terminal hanging on the wire? Is there too much mechanical load on the wire through the terminal? Because that will then deteriorate with thermal cycling even faster.
And more importantly, if you wanted to do a piece of homework once you've done this, on the left-hand side, put your EAWR, but on chapter 13, see if you can link them to then section 525 connections, etc. If you can furthermore take it onward into the book. So in your chapter 13, your 6 pages, you've got a level up into the law, and you've got a guide that just crib sheets across to the relevant applicable section in the wiring regulations. I know it's slightly maybe a weird way of looking at things, but it really does work for me, which is why I always say learn the 6 pages and the rest is your oyster. But yeah, regulation 10, connections, really important. Let's see if I can move this on. Next one is me again. Yes. So protection for safety. So we're getting a bit warmer now. Protection against thermal effects, because there is another regulation that covers it. 13132. Persons, livestock, fixed equipment and fixed materials adjacent to electrical installation equipment shall be protected against harmful effects of heat or thermal radiation emitted by electrical equipment, and in particular following: combustion, ignition, degradation of materials, risk of burns, impairment of the safe function of installed equipment. Electrical equipment should not present a fire hazard to adjacent materials. Guys, did we not do a podcast on thatched buildings and thatched roofs? Fundamental principles, this. So you don't even need specialist information from a thatch society. This is fundamentals. If you know it's going to get warm or hot, or the air is hot, that mutual interaction, I think, is the first phrase.
Going back to your initial design, if you're doing a design and you're working in a industrial location, or there's a warehouse, or there's a storage area, and that, you need to make sure you understand the certain guidelines about where the client intends on storing waste material, storing combustible material. There are sections later in the regs about storing of combustible materials and buildings made of combustible materials. We must understand the intention of the installation through the life, or at least until the subsequent inspections in our design. And then, as Paul would say, we need to document those decisions, because if we do a design today and the client has told us, oh, we're only putting this type of material in here, and we decide on a certain type of luminaire with a certain type of warm beam of heat from it, or radiant heaters, and then in 18 months they change the use of the building, or they change the products they are storing, we need to have a declaration that of what is being stored, or what is being used in that location, so in case subsequently those decisions change afterwards, because that doesn't protect our system unless we document what decisions we made at the beginning. And those discussions that we had with the client on what those decisions were, and the client needs to get involved with that and agree with us that these discussions were made, and these systems were designed on that point, because everything can change later. Due diligence at that point.
So this one, I put another 5 for this, because this to me is that
brief, though, Dave. Yeah, so it's a thing that Sorry.
That's right, Paul. Go on, do what you're saying.
What Dave was describing there is sort of a design brief that you would need of a commercial client or industrial client.
You've got to let the client know what not assumptions, but what decisions you've made on based on what they've given you.
Yeah.
You don't just do a template design and assume that they're all, one shoe fits all. And the client needs to know that that's the limitations of their installation, for they can to use it safely. And a lot of us don't quite put that down on our designs.
Again, if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll be able to just fast forward it back and forth. But again, protection against thermal effects, it's a very simple link to don't put equipment into use where its strength capability may give rise to danger. 5 is definitely a quick win. Moving on, Dave, you're going to do 131.4 now.
131.4, protection against overcurrent. Persons and livestock will be protected against injury, and property will be protected against damage due to excessive temperatures or electromechanical stresses caused by overcurrents likely to arise in live conductors. Take note that protection can be achieved by limiting the overcurrent to a safe value and or a safe duration.
So what do we think here, boys? I'm not going to do a poll. We'll save that for John's one.
Okay, so let me look in my book. Well, Regulation 11, means for protection against excess of current.
Damn you and your book. Yes, absolutely.
I've got a book.
So again, I find this from a learner perspective as well. I've done this exercise with some of our learners at work. It's quite amazing to realize that some of these laws are basics. Means for protection from excess of current in a law. Efficient means suitably located shall be provided for protecting from excess of current every part of a system as may be necessary to prevent danger. Lots of people have said the electricity work regs need to be updated. Maybe the guidance, maybe the wording.
We have had a recent discussion around the table with people where there was a frustrating throwback to the point that in one document it's called an installation, and in the other it's called a system. And they seem to just find that humorous and allow that to maintain confusion. It'd be nice if they could just kind of sort
think
that out.
given the rise of the prosumer and the smart homes, I think a system is probably the best term, or at least
I think so, because it
definition.
encapsulates everything in my viewpoint.
I agree completely. But yeah, so we naturally, I thought that was an 11 because I think it just speaks volumes. Means of protecting from excess of current, protection against overcurrent. It's a direct link. Really, really simple stuff. Next one, JW.
131.5. This is protection against fault current. So conductors other than live conductors and any other parts intended to carry a fault current shall be capable of carrying that current without attaining an excessive temperature. Electrical equipment, including conductors, shall be provided with mechanical protection against electromechanical stresses of fault currents as necessary to prevent injury or damage to persons, livestock, or property.
Oh, I've just launched a poll and oh dear.
Yeah, I told you some of these aren't on the poll.
Right, I'm going to cancel the poll. I apologise for launching the poll in the first place. Basically, I was hoping that this would prove the point in case. This is exactly another one. What you'll find in chapter 13 is there's more than one regulation that gives a little bit of clarity on every little step of the way. Thermal effects, overcurrent, fault current, basic protection. It kind of almost repeats itself to try and hit home. Henceforth, some of these numbers come up again and again and again. But
it's the different way of wording things so that
yeah,
we can understand, or the electricians, people using BS 7671 can understand the different aspects of the way they look at an electrical system as opposed to the way the law looks at the electrical system.
Yes.
Totally
agree. Totally agree.
We could add 4.1 into almost any of these as well. All systems shall at all times use such construction as to prevent, so as far as reasonably practicable, danger.
Yep.
What more do you need to say? Almost.
Yes. Some of them are actually really fundamental, and you can just quote one and it should be able to take you to your 29. But just remember something, while you as the selector and erector, whether you're working in commercial or industrial, the reason why this is so important is that 29 defense. Have you taken all reasonable steps? And I think in the asset management webinar and a couple of our podcasts, I've said, when you're writing an email and you're banging your head against a brick wall, you need to make sure that in your emails, when I was an NICQS and I would write to the chief engineers for London Underground, in my emails, I hereby discharge my duty of care. I have taken all reasonable steps. I can't get anywhere with this. It's now for you to do something about it. The minute they see that, because they're very well educated, the chief engineers, they immediately see that the legal obligation's on them, and then something gets done. And as a contractor, I was doing that to my clients.
Absolutely.
That was with smart clients. There are a lot of clients out there who are dumb. That unfortunately, you're going to have to don't lower your standards for dumb clients. Show them that you're competent is my advice.
I'm sure we've all, I've issued electrical danger notifications to health boards, hospitals.
Yes, you have, haven't you? Yes.
Yeah, and that was on a new build. That was on a new build. I issued an electrical danger notification.
Right. Who's next? Is it John? No,
right,
John, you've just done yours. Paul. No, it's Paul. It's Paul.
Oh, my turn, is it?
Yes.
Okay. So, protection against voltage disturbances and measures against electromagnetic disturbances. These have come up quite a hot topic in 7671 recently, haven't they?
They have.
Persons and livestock shall be protected against injury, and property shall be protected against any harmful effects as a consequence of a fault between live parts of circuits supplied at different voltages, in accordance with Section 442. So, how do we map that back to the electricity work regs then?
I took a punt at 6, which is adverse or hazardous environments. And funnily enough, the clue is on the cover of the guidance note, really, as well. Yeah. Electromagnetic disturbances. I know Sean Passat from Dane and Kirsty from Surge Protection Devices, they spend a lot of their time going around trying to educate people. I don't think the wiring regs have done themselves any glory with that very silly risk assessment, which hopefully will be gone in future editions of the regs, and we just get to the point where surge protection becomes a norm, and lightning protection is considered correctly rather than just completely ignored, or contractors ask for advice from the ECA, the NIC, or NAPIT, and that potentially is completely wrong as well, because we know from speaking to contractors that has happened.
Yeah,
that's me being controversial for the day. Sorry.
And as I said, there's always opportunities to learn more about this, and education is key. I know Kirsty at Surge has got some great online training to upskill our over voltage protection. I've just recently been to a course with Dane because I saw an opportunity to go on a training with Robin, who is part of JPEL, and Sean Passant, who is chair of Atlas. I thought, well, you know, a room with both of those guys in, with the lightning protection aspect with 62305, I just jumped on.
Of course you would.
Very valuable day. There's so much more to learn though, which is great. But that's the point of due diligence, understanding where things go.
I'm hoping I can go on that in January. But if we take everyone through Regulation 6, because it's the first time we've mentioned it tonight, electrical equipment which may reasonably, foreseeably be exposed to A, mechanical damage, the effects of weather, salt mist deposits, UV, natural hazards, you know, tidal movements, rivers, ponds, whatever, temperature. Well, we're the UK, temperature's up and down like a yo-yo. Pressure, you know, at height or down below ground, on the underground. The effects of wet, dirty, dusty, corrosive conditions, or flammable, explosive substances, dust, vapors, or gases, so that EX, ATEX type stuff, shall be of such construction or as necessary protected to prevent, so far as reasonably practicable, that time and cost balance, danger arising from such exposure. Now, the hazard here is if you have a petrol station and they don't do it right and it blows up, your defense, you're not really going to have one if it blows up, because it's fairly evident you haven't taken reasonable steps. But one thing that rings out to me in that large chunk of text, Appendix 5, external influences.
Yes. That was exactly what I was going to say. External influence BE2, my favorite. It enhanced nature, an increased risk of fire due to the nature of process and or stored materials. Woodworking shops, barns, farm buildings with hay and straw, and flour mills, sugar processing plants, plastic processing plants, wherever you're creating this sort of fine level of dust that could be I
mean, and this is the thing, these are questions that you'll have to get from the client or ask them about their processes, about their plan to change their processes over the time, you know, because especially in manufacturing, especially new younger companies, things can change in a matter of months with growth. You know, I visited an agri company just a few weeks ago which have some issues with dust, but they're already planning on taking over 2 more sites. You know, you've got to look at what the intentions is with growth, and you've got to ask those questions so you can document what decisions were made at the time when you made your design.
So just for ease of mindset, that regulation there, 13161, protection against voltage disturbances, is Regulation 6 in the EAWR, or can be very easily interpreted as Regulation 6 in the EAWR, but also then flips the coin back into the Choose Your Own Adventure book known as BS 7671, Appendix 5, external influences, which we drum on about, and is a really important part of the wiring regulations, because they're just prompts that make you think, have I thought about the utilization? Have I thought about protection against people in the building if it's a nursery or if it's a refinery or whatever? So very important.
Big one that I've come across over in my time when I was on the tools a lot and doing EACRs and stuff was I did a lot in the recycling waste industry and paper reprocessing, you know, paper recycling, cardboard recycling, and plastic recycling. The dust that comes off them, you'd be surprised how fine it is, and you'd be surprised how far it gets, you know.
Yes, indeed. Right, moving on, Dave. 13162. It's another.
So carrying on with voltage disturbance protection and electromagnetic disturbances. This one is persons and livestock will be protected against injury, or shall, I'll emphasize, shall be protected against injury, and property shall be protected against damage as a consequence of overvoltages, such as those originating from atmospheric events or from switching, in accordance with section 443. Take note, protection against lightning strikes on your structures itself comes under the 62305 series, which is frustratingly outside of the scope of 7671.
Yet it's mentioned here.
Yeah, it's mentioned here.
It's mentioned here. So we have said repeatedly, work from the regulations, and you're going to have to learn these other ones.
As I say, I did a course with some guys in this industry who make overvoltage devices, and they design lightning protection systems, and they had nothing but frustration to the fact that electricians aren't getting some involvement with 62305, not from an installation of lightning protection perspective, but an understanding of how the risk is controlled perspective. so we know how we can work with it, because we can't comply with this, which would then result in an EAWR, which I'm going to go with 6 again, like before, if we don't have the knowledge of the risk assessment from 62305. You know,
this is the one that they get all these people that seem to think that surge protection, whatever, is some kind of optional feature, and you can ask the household if they want it. No, it isn't. It is required. It says so right there. You shall put it in. So surge protection is not an optional feature. Required, has been for quite some time.
Yeah. I think it's just that surge protection is not new technology either. It's been around for donkey's years. It's proven technology.
Yeah.
I think one of the problems was when the 18th came out, there was a big hoo-ha with industry bodies in obviously chapter 4, when there was a little bit more, I would say clarity, but it didn't cause clarity, it caused confusion. But it stimulated a debate. And because it stimulated debate and confusion, I think a lot of people just went, does that mean domestic? No, I'm not doing that, because that's more cost, which means I'll lose the work. And the grey, what do they call it? It's the grey economy, which is the unregistered, apparently cowboys, if you're not registered, which is rubbish, but
yeah,
the grey economy that undercuts the hardworking, honest and decent person can benefit by not putting surge protection in and not protecting the homes. We can't do anything about that because we don't have a regulated industry, unfortunately, and none of the industry bodies will dare campaign to say that there are rogue.
But yeah, again, all you can do is your due diligence, come up with your own outputs, and if you do your diligence well, you hopefully can help educate clients as to why you're incorporating these devices and these selection decisions. You know,
you can also argue number 5 on that as well, and on both of them. But I just threw that in because no electrical equipment should be put into use which strength and capability may be exceeded. If you have a atmospheric event and a transient, your equipment will be exceeded.
Everything's got an impulse withstand tolerance, hasn't it? Or what is it, like typically 2.5 kilovolts for category 2 as a standard stuff, you know?
Bombarding us with your science now, aren't you? Because you've been on your course, bless you.
No, that's 7671 stuff, but that's that's normal stuff. But if you're going to have this over voltage, that's all gone.
Yes, at
that point,
Yep. Right, moving on. JW.
Okay, 136.3. Protection against voltage disturbances and measured against electromagnetic disturbances. Similar theme to before. Persons and livestock shall be protected against injury, and property shall be protected against damage as a consequence of undervoltage and any subsequent voltage recovery in accordance with section 445.
Shall we run a poll?
Just check that the answers that you suggest are in the poll, mate.
Oh yeah.
I'm sorry. This is the problem. Right. I only have 10 answers in the poll.
So can everyone see the poll? And I think I've set it so you can vote. I can't vote, but you can vote.
Oh, yeah.
No.
Just while we're doing this, I'm just going to read a couple of comments because I'm catching up now.
That's great.
Joseph has mentioned with regards to SPDs, some national consultancies are still not specifying surge protection as standard.
Yep.
It's.
I have done lectures at large national consultancies, Arcadis, and they didn't really know much about surge protection either.
I've just spent an hour and a half on a Teams meeting this afternoon with one really major consultancy and another really major contractor, tier 1 contractor, civils, electrical, mechanical, M&E. And it is amazing how badly they get things wrong.
Yes.
Oh, I mean, I saw. There was an article in our industry produced an article. I think it was one of our CPSs had put an article out, and one of the online marketing companies pushed it. And then I saw Sean Passon going, "But what about this? You've done an example of a warehouse, and you've decided to try the risk assessment when you don't even go near that risk assessment if it's a warehouse. The point of the risk assessment is to decide if you do not actually need SPDs. You assess risk to not need them." And they were just using it as an example. And even he got frustrated with that. It's very bad. It's just badly used. Hopefully it's going to disappear in the future.
is now the time to tell everyone that Sean will be appearing on one of our upcoming podcasts, because I think we've done enough now over the last, since the 18 months or so we did the last one, and we've grown better as far as our application of it. So we'll do another one covering surge and lightning protection. I think, who knows, we may get another 4-hour megathon out of it. Who knows?
Oh gosh, yeah.
Just mentioned that Mark Holmes has put a question in the Q&A, which is actually quite interesting. We'll
saw that. We'll have to.
End.
Yeah, we'll have to definitely come at that at the end. It's a good question.
We will be doing that at the end. So
see that. Okay, right. Well, I'm going to end
claim
this.
the Fifth Amendment on that one.
Don't worry. Can I just ask everyone who hasn't participated? There's only 10 people so far. I'm going to close. Not even half of you have done it yet. So if you want to, come on, guys, get voting.
Come on, guys and girls.
I know Sean's on here, so I know he's expecting a 5-hour megathon, but if you can all vote, because I'm going to close this in 15 seconds so that we can briskly go through, because there's a part 2 to this. But what I do want to do is it's really important to get this fundamental principles documented in this type of video form, a webinar form, so that we can say we've done that, and it's a resource for learners, hopefully, of any age or stage of your career.
Yeah, and say again, obviously, this is not the only potential mapping that could be done. This is just, we're just giving you examples here. Yes. Because, like I said earlier on, and then we missed it, you won't know what regulation that you're going to be prosecuted under until the papers drop on your.
Exactly, but the just the mental practice of connecting regulation to legislation. If you practice it, then when someone's dropping a legislation in front of you, you can go, right, let me reverse back and draw in these dots. Is it a form of
mind mapping? I've never been able to find the correct term, but it's my tool, my mind mapping, the way I learned this. Everybody learns differently. I'm a visual and audible learner. I like to draw lines and just hold different books up. But I'm going to end this poll now anyway. Right. So,
okay, cool.
Right, so the poll is done, and I'm going to share the results. And 62% have said Regulation 6. So what did we say? We said Regulation 6. However, Regulation 5, 23% of everybody, absolutely bang on. Yeah, you can use Regulation 5. The reason why we went for obviously 6 was because of that adverse or hazardous environments, the reference to over voltage, Section 445. That was why I picked 6 over 5. But yeah, you're right, you could easily use 5. Some have used Regulation 7, installation, protection, or placing conductors. Okay. And also systems, work activities, protective equipment, number 4. I think they're all valid go-to parts of the regulations, to be honest with you. So I'm going to stop sharing now. And I'm going to move us on if my computer works. And the next person up is, who is it? I think it's Paul or John. Yep, Paul.
It's me, is it?
Go on, yeah, go for it.
So, protection against voltage disturbances. Didn't we do this one just now?
Nope, point 3.
Measures against electromagnetic disturbances. The installation shall, again, in 7671, have an adequate level of immunity against electromagnetic disturbances so as to function correctly in the specified environment. Customer specification again. In accordance with Section 444, the installation design shall take into consideration the anticipated EM emissions generated by the installation or the installed equipment. We're seeing this a lot now, installed equipment generating EM, EMC, EMI, which shall be suitable for the current using equipment used with or connected to the installation. So this links back to selection of RCDs.
This also links back to, Paul, a number of issues. Now, it's really interesting that in this section, there are 4 regulations that effectively refer to EMI, EMC, over voltage, electromagnetic disturbances. So it's really important. You can link this to Chapter 32 as well, the requirements in Chapter 32. We were discussing this the other night, lads, as you know we were. But we know that there are examples now of installations where there are new build estates being built in England where they've got solar PV, 3-phase 63 amp supplies, and they've got EV. And some of these new builds, when they've plugged in their EV chargers, the I curve, the current curve off of the PV has collapsed. And the inverters have shut down. So this whole, charge your car while you're at home with the electrics being generated. There's compatibility issues. There's electromagnetic disturbances. And we need to potentially, and I'm not giving away future podcasts, think about how this equipment mutually interacts and talks to each other.
Yeah, compatibility.
Compatibility, indeed. So we'll go with a 6 on this one. But let's just go into 6 again, adverse and hazardous environment. So I think it's fair to say those ones are pretty well covered. However, I want to throw a curveball at you all. What other regulation do we think would cover this? And I'm throwing a curveball at everybody now.
All right.
I'm going to go past 29.
Oh, okay. So you're going to 30.
I'm going to 30.
You're playing with 30 now.
Exemption certificates. This is a really important bit. So I
was waiting for this.
I have in my career worked with people who have said, I'm exempt from the electricity at work regulations. And I'm thinking, brilliant. Where's your exemption certificate? Now, in Regulation 30, it clearly states, subject to paragraph 2, the health and safety executive may, by certificate in writing, exempt any person, any premise, any electrical equipment, any electrical system, any electrical process or activity, or any class of the above from any requirement or prohibition imposed by these regulations. Okay, and any such exemption may be granted subject to conditions and to a time limit, and may be revoked by a certificate in writing at any time. So this is a departures, effectively, like what we have in 7671. We can depart. This is the departure from, but you've got to get it in writing. And I can tell you now, and Paul's nodding because me and Paul both know a HSE inspector who sits on an electrical safety roundtable with us. And getting that, you'll need to be a major, major, major infrastructure project and have done a hell of a lot of due diligence to prove that it's a multi-billion-pound experience. And I'll give you one example. London Underground, when I first started, had no main equipotential bonding, none on any services whatsoever in the late 90s.
Yeah.
The chief engineer at the time, his excuse was, we're under the ground. Why do we need earthing and bonding? I laughed because they actually had a standard that was called exemptions from 7671, which in turn could have been interpreted as exemptions from electricity work regs. That got withdrawn pretty quick when everybody kicked back and said, don't be stupid, it is reasonably practical to do earthing. It's essential for the protection of safety. And what about 2/3 of the underground being above ground, not under the ground, in effect via tube, which you could argue is an earth rod, which they do use as an earthing system. And so these exemption certificates are very, very rare to find. I don't know of any place where an exemption certificate is granted, but there is always the potential for it. And it's a really, really rarely spoken about regulation.
Let's be honest, your average domestic contractor is not going to get an exemption.
No, this is not aimed at the dwelling guys, the domestic guys. This is the heavy industrial spark, the major project guys. And I'll be honest with you, even Crossrail wouldn't get an exemption certificate.
Maybe nuclear, maybe generation, maybe distribution.
Would something like offshore go down that avenue or not?
Maybe.
I mean, we're talking like how departures works in 7671, where you've got to put all of the work in to evidence that there's no lesser safe degree, and that's a lot of work.
It is.
You know,
that's the crux of my hour-and-a-half meeting this afternoon. They didn't comply with the standards, so they've now got a lot of legwork to do, because you know, we can ignore this, we can ignore 7671, but it's not a good plan. It makes life hell.
Free environments, stuff like that, you may have to do special installation requirements, special selection and erection requirements to ensure that there are no sparks in these free environments.
Is this an exception? Sorry, is this an exception certificate from EAWR or any one regulation?
Well, it depends on what you can persuade them to do, doesn't it?
Yes.
I mean, if I tried to comply with all of it, but there was one regulation I just couldn't get done, would an exception certificate be suitable?
I would argue that you would have to present your case as to why you can comply. So, for instance, you may build a massive piece of infrastructure temporarily, and let's say it's for National Grid. Let's say it's a bypass connection for a generator that will, you know, back up part of the National Grid in case it fails. However, you can't guarantee that the safest system of work will be able to be applied because it requires manual intervention working live, just because of the nature of the work. Okay, then you may turn around and say, look, I've put all reasonable steps in place and I need an exemption, and I will have suitable and sufficient means of mitigation in tools, training, materials, PPE. I will eliminate risk as far as I will demonstrate. Now, these things are novels that you're going to have to write out. To be honest with you, they're novels.
But isn't that, I thought that evidence was used to actually fulfill compliance with the regulation.
Yeah, but when you're doing your design is demonstrating that compliance. But where it can't, most designs, including 7671, is there not a document that says departures from 7671? where
There's a
the
box,
designer
yeah.
should list the departures. Well, by the designer listing the departures, when I get a certificate, if I see the departure section filled in, the first thing I do is go, where is the supporting document for this? Because you are then breaching electricity work regs.
Well, yeah.
That's the point.
Yes.
Too many people, the departures box is there for use, and unless it's a very simple, basic departure
Mm-hmm.
that you can justify with a one-line answer, for example, you've used, I can't even think of one now, a flexible cable, where you would have expected to have used a more rigid cable like a steel wire armored or a 6491 type cable with a class 2 conductor or class 1 conductor, because you've got something that is going past or over or under or connecting to that's vibrating.
Right.
So, a quick simple departure. Like, otherwise, you're looking exactly as Paul says. You should be backing that up with risk assessments, with justification, with failure mode and effects analysis, with your design. All that should be behind that departure. It's not just a flippant, I'm departing because of this. There's got to be something to back it up if you want to cover yourself under this. And
there is a balance with everything, because a lot of people will be thinking, oh, you're just saying that I have to do loads of paperwork before I turn a screwdriver. No, you have to have the brains to understand what decisions you're making when you're selecting, erecting and working electrical systems. Because if it goes wrong, you must have a defense.
And many of those decisions you need to reflect on if better planning could have avoided those decisions.
Yeah, hindsight.
Sometimes if you've got an issue you're trying to then control, if it'd been planned better in the beginning, then that would have been,
Indeed.
avoided.
Right, let's crack on, because I know Mr. Mitchell will want us to be on here for another 3 hours. Right, it's me, isn't it? Right, okay. So 131, protection for safety again. 1317, protection against power supply interruption, where danger or damage is expected to arise due to the interruption of supply. Suitable provisions shall be made in the installation or installed equipment. I refer to you to the example I've just given. If you were doing a standby generator or a changeover connection system, what regulation do you think where danger or damage is expected to arise due to interruption of supply? Now, this could be loads of things. It could be applied to emergency lighting, fire alarm systems, battery backups. But it's interesting, interruption of supply. There's a level of danger with interruption of supply because a lot of commercial industrial installations have backup systems. So my interpretation of this was 4.
Okay.
Safe systems, work activities and protective equipments. Yeah, this was that all systems shall be constructed to prevent danger. As may be necessary to prevent danger, all systems shall be maintained so as far to prevent reasonably practical danger. Every work activity, including operation and maintenance, and any equipment provided shall obviously be suitable for its intended use and be properly used. For me, this is Safe Systems of Work 101. This is the one that I went to first when I was reading this, because it's protection against power supply interruption. I need to have made sure that I've maintained, I operate correctly, carry out in a manner that it's not dangerous, that the installation is selected and erected. This isn't your dwelling stuff now. This isn't your domestic. This is your commercial industrial type stuff. And I went for a 4 on it because it just made sense to me on that. Moving on, Dave.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned it's not domestic. You could maybe in the future argue that if you had like smoke detectors or fire alarms working on the supply and that was safety critical and you had a power outage.
What am I talking about? You're right.
Yeah, but that's about it.
Prosumering. No, you're right.
Yeah.
Look at prosumer.
Yeah.
If you've got a Tesla wall and an EV Tesla and a PV system on the roof, if there's a power supply interruption, you're still going, but you're laughing. You're just sitting there going, hey, I'm a prosumer. I'm in island mode. This is the future, by the way. This is going to happen. So this is more relevant to domestic as time goes on.
Something we're going to have to think about more and more is the criticality of our wiring systems.
Well, we start a new section now. Design.
132, design. Are we
So
reading this?
many electricians, yes, you are, but I just want to start off by saying the amount of electricians who say, I don't need to do a design.
Oh, I don't do design.
It's a fundamental principle. Dave, on to you.
All right, 132.1. General. The installation will be designed, or shall be designed, by one or more skilled persons to provide for the protection of persons, livestock, and property in accordance with Section 131, which is the fundamental principles we've just gone through.
Yep.
And the proper functioning of the electrical installation for its intended use. So it's got to actually function for the job. The information required as base is for the design stated in Regulations 1322 to 5, and then it will meet the requirements or will comply with regulations 1326 to 16. So yeah, you must fulfill the requirements of the fundamental principles from section 131, which is basically all of part 4 in the regs book, by the way. That's what part 4 in the regs book, protection for safety, does. It expands on the fundamental principles of section 131. So you've got to comply with all of that, or the requirements of that. And then fundamentally, if you go, yeah, well, I'll do this and I'll do this and I'll do that, but then the output is you've got an installation that is not going to meet the requirements of the client, it's not going to function for the intended use, then, you know, you've gone backwards. It needs to be functional.
So I just launched a poll realizing the answer wasn't in there. So apologies, everybody. Me being an idiot again. My interpretation of this one, when I read my regs book, highlighter pen, I look for keywords. And the first keyword that stands out, which is unusual, is skilled.
Okay.
Because to me, skilled builds there's a bigger picture here. So I went for, if I can find the right button to click, I went for regulation 16 of the electricity at work regs, because if I'm to design all of this good stuff to provide this protection and functioning and all the rest of it, I need to be a person who is competent to prevent danger and injury. Do you want to read that bit?
Yeah. So no person shall be engaged in any work activity where technical knowledge or experience is necessary to prevent danger or appropriate injury, unless he possesses such knowledge or experience or is under such a degree of supervision as may be appropriate, having regard to the nature of the work. I find myself having to repeat those words, the nature of the work, so many times. It's one of the issues I have with people who call themselves fully qualified and all this stuff. It's like, if you don't want to take on other challenges or other avenues in the future, but you've got to make sure that the nature of the work you're undertaking, that you have the ability to prevent danger.
So Dave Betteridge has said on the chat, competence equals skate. So I'm going to level you up, Dave. I've got a new term. It's called skating. Okay. Skills, knowledge, attitude, training, qualifications, your experience, your interest, and the ability to say it. Skating is my new term now for defining the generalist application of competency. If you can use skating as a term to inquire and be inquisitive of people, I think, I think it works, to be honest with you. But skate is great. We love skate. I like that. I'm stealing it. Yeah, steal away, skating.
Unless, as you said, this does not mean you have to have a 2396 design course to be a designer. You know, if you're going to take on the requirements of 7671, if you're going to design a system, then by default, you're making those decisions.
So,
you know,
just on this one though, and I'm gonna challenge this. So we've said obviously to do design, persons need to be competent, but what other regulations? And I'm going to throw this one without doing a poll. Very simply, all of them. If you're going to be designing something that the electrical installer is utilizing, you need to consider these regulations. And when you read through them, they're actually very simplistic: safe system of work, adverse environments, insulation, connections, isolation, all that good stuff. It's fundamental principles. And this is why I keep saying to people, learn your chapter.
Yeah. And I want to just say something Joe's mentioned here. Be aware that design's outsourced to consultancies. Many write in their terms and cons that they provide design intent only. Accountability lies with the main contractor to ensure the design is compliant with all relevant standards.
Good point.
I've got, I mean, my experience, many design companies just sit in an office, play with software with some intent. But if they have not gone to site and they have not had that discussion with the client and have properly done part 3 of the regs, you know, assessment of general characteristics, which I often translate to be pre-work survey. There's so much data that you need to collect to start building a proper functional, we just saw functional mentioned, design. And you can't do that sat in an office unless you've got an awful lot of other information.
I do know from speaking of personal experience in rail, I've employed major design consultancies to do design, and Joey's absolutely right. What they do is on the front cover of their documents, even if it's a detailed design, they will say this is design intent only. Responsibility for compliance lies with the competent installer, and they'll put it on the drawings. So what I do is anytime I engage one of these companies, I ensure that every part of that is removed. And what I found with the major ones go straight to their safety directors, straight to their insurance companies, and they do it because they've lost money on jobs where they've done negligent or incompetent designs because they haven't managed and supervised the works being done under Regulation 16. That's then cost the contractor money and the project money, hundreds of millions of pounds. So the designers and the insurers get together and they come up with these Teflon-y coating words of statements of intent. Now, I actually had a chat with a designer the other week who produced a design and said, I produce designs based on a competent electrician being able to read and do the install. He then had a phone call from said electrician or electrical installer's electrician who said to him, this earth bar, what color cable connects to it? This is a true story. And where he had an earth bar going around a static free room, he then got asked the question of, it's in front of the door. Does it need to go around the door? Now, people will laugh when they hear this and go, yeah, you're making this up. I'm not making it up. So I genuinely, I could write a book over the last 5 years of some of the questions I've been asked. You can't make this stuff up. You just can't. But that's what's out there, unfortunately. And that's fine. We just need to help and support each other and teach and educate. So yeah, all of them, really important. Design. So never let anybody tell you that there isn't a responsibility to consider the design, the system as a design. And because we're about to go through it, and we're not going to finish all of this today, but John, do you want to carry on 1322?
Yeah, that is characteristics of available supply or suppliers, because you can have more than one. So information on the characteristics of the available supply or suppliers shall be determined by calculation, measurement, inquiry, or inspection. Now, the following characteristics shall be included in the documentation referred to in 13213 to show conformity with the regulations. I noted shall be, so again, it's something you will be doing. We've got nature of the current, AC and or DC, purpose and number of conductors. For AC line conductors, we've got neutral, protective conductor, pen conductor, and for DC, conductors equivalent to those, protective conductors, pen conductors, outer, middle, earth, live, and so on. Values and tolerances, so your nominal voltage and the tolerances, so that's like your plus or minus 10%. Nominal frequency tolerances, maximum current allowable, prospective fault current, external earth fault loop impedance, protective measures inherent in the supply, so earth neutral or mid-wire, and there are others, and particular requirements of the distributor. And note that if the distributor changes the characteristics of the power supply, this may affect the safety of the installation, and that probably will affect the safety of the installation, in fact. So, yeah.
Can I just, I don't know if people see this. Broken pen. Hello. If the distributor changes the characteristics, did we not talk about this a year ago in a podcast where I had a TNS installation, the cable went boom, and they linked it with a bit of TNC cable, making the entire TNS TNC. And then if you go on our Instagram on our Devoted Neutral Current, I wrote to the UK Power Network who acknowledged that most of their network is TNCS. So there is no TNS anymore. Even the IET have acknowledged that TNS really doesn't exist that much unless it's a private network.
It's not just the TNS TNCS debate. I mean, you might find that additional loads are going to be put onto the network, so they redistribute where supplies are coming from, and they drop another transformer in 20 feet from the premises,
which shoots your supply characteristics all the way down, increases your fault currents. Yeah.
That I've seen happen on the railways quite a lot. Booster transformers gone in and boom, your fault current levels are through the roof. So what do you guys think on this? I know I was a bit lazy, but I'm just going to shout it out. Here's another 5.
Go with a 5.
I'm going with a 5. Strength and capability.
It's a good starting point, though, really, isn't it?
It is a great starting point.
You know,
to be honest with you, and I think it does cover a lot of that. No electrical equipment point to use, with strength and capability. Interestingly, it doesn't state about existing equipment being put into use or remaining in use. Because that note at the bottom, if the distributor changes the characteristics, they may affect the safety. But it doesn't say that in 5.
Well, again, it's just electricity at work. If you're using equipment that's already there, if the supply characteristics have shifted, you're putting that into use, aren't you?
Not if it's already in use.
4.1.
Or 4.1, yeah.
Shall at all times be of such construction as to prevent so far
at all times
practicable danger.
4.1. There you go. So 4.1. I haven't put that in the slide deck, by the way. I just literally picked that up now, reading through it for the 10th time. But there you go. Right. Next one is Mr. Skirm again.
Okay. So nature of the demand. The number and type of circuits required for lighting, heating, power, control, signaling, communication and information technology, etc., shall be determined from knowledge of locations of the points of power demand, loads to be expected on the various circuits, daily and yearly variation of demand, any special conditions such as harmonics, another big hot topic, requirements for control, signaling, communication, information technology, etc., anticipated future demand if specified. So we're back now to getting a spec from the client.
Yeah, it's all of this. I mean, I when I do like regulations training, I have to address the need to understand the utilization of the electrical installation for the life or for the planned future at least. Is the company new? Is the company going to grow? Are they not even specifying new machinery, harmonics? There's so much that can change. You've got to understand where you're working from, and all of that's got to come with a discussion.
So this is where a lot of contractors will struggle, because I get told a lot that I'm a unique client because I'm able to write what I want and then go and set it out with the electricians, and that's fine because that to me is normal. But there are a lot of clients out there who are as thick as two wooden planks, who don't know and will see an NIC badge and go, "You tell me what I want something to work. Go away and do." And this is where 132 kicks in, fundamental principles. You can then maximize your opportunity for revenue and to de-risk the client by saying, I will need to produce a small design. Now, it doesn't have to be much. You can just do a single line calc on Amtech. Yeah, selection, erection of materials, documenting it all in your RAMs, your methodology, etc., etc. That is more than enough. I'm going to use Galv. I'm going to use GRP. I'm going to consider this, putting at height, etc. For this one, I went with, I've just gone completely off track. Hang on a second. My screen's gone funny.
Yeah, and then the client comes along and says, "Oh, you're too expensive," and he sends all your documents. Somebody else doesn't cut you.
This is where you'd have to.
Paul, that is the nature of the beast.
This is where you have to evaluate your value. I mean, if you're going to do all that work, then you can go, well, what else can I do? Maybe you can even give some data to your client about what they have, like demand, diversity, maximum current allowable. Give them an understanding of what the capacity they have, what they can do in the future. Just so they know how to control their systems better. You know, in a few years, we're going to have energy efficiency come back at us. I'm going to start talking about, I don't know, dare we talk about the Barry Center methods again, and the idea of having that information passed across. It's all going to be relating to our knowledge or our discussions with the clients. You know,
agree.
You got your thing working now, Paul?
I have. Thank you for helping me with that stalling. So yeah, regulation 5, I went with obviously no strength, but also 6, adverse and hazardous environments. Because I think if we go back to that, nature of demand, hazardous environments, special conditions, yearly variation demand, locations of points of power demand, requirements of control. I think there's adapted, anticipated future demand. I think, and I'm going to say this out loud, that when we are doing maximum demand calculations, I think we are in the Stone Ages. We are now using whole different load profiles, and I think maximum demand calcs need to be seriously reconsidered, but in a very phased and controlled
We've said this a few times. The processes used, especially like in the on-site guide, need to be addressed now.
They've not been updated for years.
No.
And more really. Sorry, John.
Yeah. Most of what's in there it dates from the 1930s. That's how old it is. So.
Interesting you say that, John, because there are now, I believe, BSI Flex documents that talk about the drive to reduce the energy consumption even more now. So where you have a 10-watt bulb, you may have it as a 2-watt bulb. So really driving that energy consumption down to a minuscule amount. And that's what scares me, because I think in 30, 40 years, houses, their maximum demands may be in the very low amperage range.
Well, we're going to need all that capability to charge all these electric vehicles without blowing holes in the pavement with the dodgy joints heating up with the dual heating.
And that's the time risk balance there that the DNOs are probably taking. Right, staying with design, 1324, and that's with, it's with me again, isn't it? Yeah, sorry.
You, yeah.
Right, electrical supply systems for safety services or standby electrical supply systems. Where a supply for safety services or standby electrical supply systems is specified, the following shall be determined: characteristics of the supply and circuits to be supplied by the safety source. Excuse me. So what do we think with that one? I think I took a punt at, I went with my safe zone. Yeah, number 5, because, have I done something wrong here? Yeah,
that
missed
needs
out
that.
5.
No, 5 is there. That slide that you just had needs to not be there because we've already done that one.
Oh, right.
1, 3, 2, 3. We're on 1, 3, 2, 4.
Okay, I've messed up there then. Apologies.
You've got a little gap. All right.
Okay, apologies. Yeah, Regulation 5. So strength, capability of the electrical equipment. We all know Regulation 5. I've done it a few times. We'll skip over that one, and that one is a mistake. My apologies. You could also argue connections. We'll just jump across to 13251, environmental conditions.
Yeah.
Dave.
Me. Okay, environmental conditions. Design of the installation will take into account the environmental conditions to which it will be subjected.
Okay. 6. It's a good start for 10.
Well, again, I mean, you could be lazy to go, it's got environments in it. So, yeah, you could definitely start here with 6.
But this is one of the things as well. There are 3 references in chapter 13 alone just about external influences. So there's at least 3 direct links to Regulation 6 and then Appendix 5, external influences, a concise list of. And I do think 6 is the go-to one for if we were mind mapping environmental conditions. Design shall take into account. Well, adverse and hazardous environments would be one of those key things that would extend our thought processes around the normal and reasonable use of electrical installation, say in a dwelling, or, you know, we go commercial industrial here, really, aren't we, to a certain extent, or gardens.
Well, yeah, but it's not. We need to make sure we don't see those words and go, oh, that must mean, you know, like ATEX, COMPEX, HV. You know, we must make sure we understand that hazardous environments occur in LV systems. You know, we have Part 7, which is there because of hazardous environments with additional requirements to comply, like bathrooms and stuff. So we can actually identify what hazardous environments are. It doesn't just mean, oh, that only applies to, you know, COMPEX, ATEX, etc.
Agree. We will move on. JW 13252.
Yep, this is more environmental conditions. So equipment in surroundings susceptible to risk of fire or explosion shall be so constructed or protected, and such other special precautions shall be taken as to prevent danger.
Should we run a poll? This one. Let's relaunch the poll. See what everyone thinks. If we could all do the poll. We're nearly there.
There we go. I've done my poll.
I think everybody's getting the theme now. I think everybody's getting the theme. So I'm going to close this in a few minutes. Everybody could just click that magic button, however they're doing it. For those watching on YouTube, we run interactive polls, and also we like this because it's a bit more live and engaging, and we do the Q&A at the end. And so apologies. We have no idea how this gets. I have no idea how to put all this into the one screen. So just forget it and enjoy the pleasure of seeing our beautiful faces and the slide deck to the right of us or left, whatever side it appears on.
Okay.
Right. Another 15 seconds. I'm going to end this, guys. And this is one that I actually did cover in the asset management webinar, where I showed a picture of some corroded containment and talked about in risk, whole life cost. How long had that been installed? Because it was 5 years. Remember some of the images I had, 5-year installation that was completely failed and shut half a railway. I'm going to end the poll now. And I'm going to share the results. And lo and behold, 93 of you thought it was Regulation 6. You were bang on. Well done. Yeah. And also 5, the go-to starter for 10, almost, apart from Paul's 4.1, which is the almost the preamble to all of it. If you want to even go for a shorter sentence to memorize. So there you go, 6 equipment that may be reasonably foreseeable exposed to mechanical damage and all that good stuff, wet, dusty, dirty, corrosive conditions. So thank you everyone for that poll. Regulation 6 was a good answer. We will move on now, and we are back to Mr. Skirm on design. If he can unmute himself.
So design cross-section area of conductors. Yeah, the cross-sectional area of conductors shall be determined for both normal operating conditions and, where appropriate, for fault conditions, according to admissible maximum temperature, admissible voltage drop, electromechanical stress is likely to occur due to short circuit and earth fault currents, the mechanical stresses to which the conductor is likely to be exposed, the maximum impedance for correct operation of short circuit and earth fault protection, the methods of installation, harmonics and thermal insulation. So we're going to go for which regs here?
I mean, we've got a variety. I mean, you can talk about strength there. You can talk about the you've got connections.
Yeah.
As well. Means
So
to protect from excess of current.
Just
sizing.
remember the mad rule of the yellow pen of doom. Okay.
Yeah.
Look for the key word, conductors. That's one that stands out for me because it appears more than once. Okay, so I picked on this one, if I can get this screen to work again, I picked 10.
You picked 10, so you picked connections.
I did. Where necessary to prevent danger, every joint and connection in a system, more than one part, shall be mechanically and electrical suitable for use. So that's my interpretation, and it's my interpretation of that requirement for design for cross-sectional area conductors. Sizing, suitability, connection details, stresses, external influences, the whole lot.
We as Sparks immediately think of a connection, right, as where we stick a wire in and tighten a screw onto it.
Yeah.
Yep.
But we're looking at a much wider thing here. We're looking at the whole system. So the connection could be the connection between the incoming supply and your current consuming device, i.e. the piece of wire that goes between them.
Interesting you said that, Paul, because on this one I didn't just pick number 10. I picked number 7.
Number 7.
Yeah, but
insulation, 10, protection, and placing of conductors.
Number 10 doesn't limit itself to a wire under a screw.
No, doesn't.
That's the joint. The connection could be the joint, or it could be the piece of wire connecting the two devices.
That's why I've used 7, because it says all conductors in a system which may give rise shall be suitably covered with insulated material and necessarily protected to prevent, so far as practical, danger, or have precautions taken in respect of them, including where appropriate, they're being suitably placed as will prevent, so far as practicable, danger. This is why we use conduits and copexes and all that jazz. So yeah, 10 and 7 was the go-to ones, because again, this is not about trying to teach you this one regulation. It's trying to enable you to create a memory map of go-to fundamental principles, fundamental laws.
If you haven't, again, if you haven't got HSR 25 in front of you and you're watching on YouTube, pause it, download it, go back and look into the guidance with HSR 25, and it'll help you really kind of see what it's getting at with these.
Indeed.
I mean, this is why DNOs and the National Grid put their cables up in the air as well, isn't it? It's out of reach. It's out,
Weirdly, you say that, because moving on to the next one, type of wiring and method of installation. The choice 1327. The choice of the type of wiring system and the method of installation shall include the consideration of the following: the nature of the location, including external influences, maybe the nature of the structure supporting the wiring, exactly what you were saying, Paul, with the National Grid and overhead lines and stuff, accessibility of wiring to persons and livestock, placing out of reach, the voltage, which is very important, the electromechanical stresses likely to occur due to short circuit and earth fault currents, electromagnetic interference, atmospheric, transient switching, other external influences, mechanical, thermal, salt mist deposits, all sorts of jazz, and those associated with fire, to which the wiring is likely to be exposed during the erection of the electrical installation or in service. Really interesting line, that really, isn't it?
Well, there are significantly different external influences in the erection processes of wiring systems, and they're very vulnerable if we don't properly consider them. They even will say to add additional measures, additional insulation, reinforced insulation, or whatever.
So I went
back to planning.
I went with 6 for that one, because I saw a lot of that. While it is basic principles of placing out of reach, I saw a lot of within that external influences. So I went to my adverse or hazardous environments one. Now, Paul will immediately say it doesn't have to be an adverse or hazardous environment. It could just be a 4.1. That it's suitable for its use, etc. But I just went initially to go to adverse or hazardous environments, mechanical damage, effects of weather. That was it sung to me. This is what I'm thinking of as an initial starter for 10. And remember, there's no limit to the numbers you can put in your reports as well. If you want to report it, that is, of course.
Yeah.
I mean,
Entirely up to you. We're not saying you should.
6, yeah.
Yeah. So I also put 7 for it as well, insulation protection and placing of conductors, especially because, you know, placing out of reach, basic protection. If you've got exposed wires at height, place them out of reach, away from roofs where somebody could get a shock. DNOs do try and do that. Next one, Dave.
Okay, protective equipment 132.8. Characteristics of protective equipment shall be determined with respect to their function, including protection against the effects of an overload, a fault current, an over voltage, an under voltage, and no voltage. The protected devices shall operate at values of current, voltage, and time, which are suitably related to the characteristics of the circuits and to the possibilities of danger.
I've run a poll.
You run a poll.
This is our last one.
Okay.
We are stopping here today, and we will carry this on next Tuesday. So what does everybody think? I think hopefully you're seeing there's a common theme with some of the numbers. But trust me, this is how I'm able to sit in meetings and go, oh, well, if we don't do that, we're in breach of regulation 6. If we don't do that, we're in breach of regulation 4. If we don't do this, you know, I've sat in meetings, and I'm not joking. I've sat in meetings where people have said, we're not doing the earthing, we're not doing the bonding. And I'm sitting there going, but it's earthing, it's regulation 8, it's a shall, regardless of cost. Really? And what you'll find is most people in the room aren't qualified electrical engineers. This is where you need to help them level up, or just, as I've used before the term, be the brick wall.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, I be the brick wall. So basically you just bombard them with regular. I will sit at work and argue statutory law till I'm blue in the face, and then say, somebody tell me if I'm wrong. The room falls silent. I then say, okay, give me the money to do the work properly. It's the life of a client, eh? It's great fun. So somebody in this poll has got a sneaky suspicion and have picked up on some of the numbers we've used. I'll give you another minute.
They've gone for a curveball, have they?
No, they've gone for, although we need to change this poll for next week so we can add some more numbers.
Yes, need to add some more options. It's limited to 10. So
right, gotcha.
Yeah, I was going to do a couple more, but we've obviously, because you're in control, we've only managed to put the one up for you.
Sorry.
No.
Right, I'll end this in 15 seconds, everybody. So please vote.
Ben Pearson in the comments has put, there's a new IET maximum demand guide coming out shortly. Perhaps it'll be more updated and helpful.
Oh, maybe they've listened.
I don't know who's working on that.
I was going to say, Paul, you should know who's working on that.
I will ask.
He's gonna, yeah.
I think I have an idea who's working on it.
I have an idea who's working on that as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
I'm going to end the poll, and I'm going to share the results.
Go for it.
And I am going to tell you that I was going for my favorite, number 5. Although my favorite's actually number 8, to be honest with you, because it's the one that links to something we'll discuss in next week's webinar. So yeah, number 5, strength and capability. No equipment should be put where strength and capability may give way to rise to danger.
So is that actually your favorite? If you were to ask the question, what's your favorite regulation? You'd say number 5.
No, my favorite regulation is 8, then 5, and 29 is my brown trousers. That keeps me out of jail.
See, I like 4 because of the need for systems to be maintained to prevent danger. Because I have to quote that a lot when I get challenged about maintenance, about systems of work and stuff. So I often end up using 4 a lot.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I'm sure there are people watching this or in here that will argue over different parts of the regulations. This is why what we're saying, we're not saying that this is doctrine or the way you must follow it. This is just a group of pals and my engineering interpretation, or mates who are happy to tell me if I'm wrong. And Mr. Skirm will happily tell me if I'm wrong, which is good. But yes, so well done, everyone. I'm going to stop sharing on that. There is no wrong answers on that, really, to be honest with you. So I'm going to close that poll. And I am then going to move us on. And next week on the EAWR, that's it. We are pretty much done, and we're going to go for round 2. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave on the screen the defense.
We'll look at the chat, and there's those couple of questions.
And that's it. Let's do the chat. So where do I find that?
If you're looking at your Zoom buddy, there's a chat and a Q&A that you can click to pop up. Chat is in between share screen and Q&A, and Q&A is there with the number 2 on it for me.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. Mark Holmes, how does an open pen device meet EAWR Regulation 9? Some devices I've looked at do not have any way to monitor resistance of the contacts. Let's be very careful in what we say here, gents.
Yeah, so 9 meaning integrity of reference conductors.
Yeah. Does anybody want to answer this without trying to get sued?
Yeah, I'll
go, John.
Have a go. I mean, what Regulation 9 actually says is that if a circuit conductor is connected to Earth or any other reference point, nothing which might reasonably be expected to give rise to danger by breaking electric continuity or introducing high impedance shall be placed in that conductor unless suitable precautions are taken to prevent that danger. So the point about this is mainly to do with your electric vehicle charging stuff, where you've got these devices which disconnect not only a line of neutral, they disconnect the protected conductor as well if a certain fault occurs.
To prevent the voltage getting over there. Yeah.
So the point here is that if it doesn't have any way monitoring resistance to those contacts, if those contacts in that device went open or high impedance or something, when it recloses, you've then got protected conductor that's not connected, or it's got a high resistance in there or something. And obviously that is not permitted by Regulation 9, as it does say further on in the guidance. So does it comply? It would seem not. Unless it's got some kind of monitoring to say it does.
That would be down to the product manufacturer to prove that in court, and they would have to prove how they've complied with the electrical equipment safety regulations and the essential health safety requirements of the electrical equipment safety regulations. And
if
directive.
If the argument is that that has made the situation safer by removing the voltage presence on an exposed conductive part, is that going to argue that it's a better exemption? Would they have to have it? Would you have to have a certificate for that?
I think that debate is happening at the moment with the DNOs.
Yeah,
and also I think this debate is one of our future podcasts. No,
it is.
Well, we are covering this in our EV one.
We've got EV webinars coming up,
and we are still researching it because there are different answers depending on which DNO network you talk to,
and we have different devices, including these new devices that automatically reclose.
I'm sure they're non-compliant.
Well, which we will be looking into.
Yeah.
Yes.
If they're going to claim they serve as a protective device, but they automatically reclose and ordinary persons are using them, then we do have some questions to chew on.
Yeah, and also Joe has put a very interesting point. Compatibility is a major concern for these devices. I think we all know that there is compatibility. The more electronics and the more electricity we introduce, the more potential EMI, the more potential compatibility issues we have. I would like to say that there is suitable and sufficient research publicly available. Paul is shaking his head because he knows he wants to go off on one. But at this moment in time, can we play the Fifth Amendment?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, he's breathing.
Let's just
Calm
say
down,
that this, it's an area of considerable problems in a whole lot of ways.
And we need to be very careful as to what we say. So we've got more research to do, and we will give you our independent opinions.
That is a cracking observation in question.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
You nearly got a suit tonight.
Mark's followed up with, does that contact have to be tested on an EACR? Well, we don't normally test electrical products on an EACR. We only normally test the installation, and that contact would form part of an electrical product. So you could argue that it should be tested under the in-service testing and inspection of electrical equipment.
Oh dear!
How good the people that do that can be.
Oh dear!
However, if you've installed one of these EV charging points, if you've got the test adapter to plug in where the car would go, you can do a loop impedance test there. That would give you some indication of whether that contact is open or not. So, but as for specifically going in and testing that contact, probably not. Because it's part of the product. If you bought a product from whoever, it's up to the manufacturer, obviously, to.
But it's very important to know which parts of 7671 or EAWR are heavily reliant upon the construction of products and stay in that product.
Yeah.
And, you know, if manufacturers claim that, you know, you follow a product standard, this is something else we're going to be talking about in an upcoming podcast or webinar about products, and even like with RCDs, where we rely on product standards instead of regular testing. We do need to know what we do, what we rely on, and what we have to continue proving ourselves.
I mean, when you're buying a product, all you can do is do your due diligence on the product standard. You can't go back and check the product against the product standards. You can't get a charge point and get the charge point product standard and go through it and get all the technical file, because you can't get the technical file. But all you can do is make sure the instructions look reasonable and
it's just it's your good due diligence. You know the requires of the regulations. You know how the legislation will instruct that. So you do your right due diligence to find the right product. You make sure that manufacturer's got this is your declarations or all your stuff that you need, and that's your due diligence.
I don't see why you can't get hold of the manufacturer's technical file. I've happily signed NDAs to review technical files, and then ended up telling the manufacturer they hadn't done their due diligence properly.
You as a client in your position, Paul, but can you imagine, you know, with no disrespect to John, he's a small electrical contractor. If he went up to, I'm not going to say Garo because there's a good chance with Garo, but one of the other pod manufacturers, you know, connection manufacturers, would they show John their technical file? Would they show Sean or?
I would hope they would, because that's their demonstration of conformity. Although, yes, you're right. I am in a unique position. So if anyone needs one, just let me know and I'll go and get it for you.
Yeah. The law says they don't have to show it to anybody apart from HSC or trading standards.
Yeah, I know. And this is where I probably use my client buying power to say, give it to me, or I won't buy any of your stuff ever.
Yes.
So I'm going to move on because Mark, God bless you, you've really tucked us up tonight. So thank you for that, although we love you. Please wait for the EV webinar. We'll do some more research on that. You've got to wait. Sorry. Dave Betteridge has got a question, and it's the old debate reg 14 versus testing ZS or calculation. Now, I personally am of the view of working on or near live conductors is the essential part of being an electrician. There is nothing wrong with working on or near live conductors, so long as you are in control of the installation, you know what you're doing. And I will quote Regulation 14, work on or near live conductors, says no person shall be engaged in any work activity or so near any live conductor other than one suitably covered of insulation, so as to prevent danger. That danger may arise unless it's unreasonable in all circumstances for it to be dead. It's unreasonable for all circumstances for him to be at work on or near live, and suitable precautions where necessary to provide, i.e. provision of suitable equipment, are taken to prevent injury. When you are testing, proving live, proving dead, you're working live. When you're doing a ZS, you're working live. If you have control of the installation and the installation isn't a hazardous dog's dinner, and you have your GS38 and insulating gauntlets and rubber gloves and you know what you're doing, then there is no harm. However, the major sites will take, and this is true of all major projects, it's isolate period. And there's nothing wrong with that, because that's being reasonably practical. If you can switch it off, have it off. However, on places like the railways, you might not be able to switch off because the impact to the national economy, etc., is great. You know, the delays to train services and all the rest of it. So that's fine. Have suitably trained, qualified, the right tools, the right equipment. In a domestic house, there isn't a defense for not being able to isolate. So if you're working on a board, switch it off, then take the cover off, then re-energize it and do your probes. Don't be lazy and just take the board cover off while it's live. That's just lazy. And that's where accidents happen, because you may not know what's in there. It could be a rat's nest. And this is where you need to protect yourself going home to your family. So for me, it's very clear. I hate the fact that the industry allows people to calculate it. And I think we're doing a podcast on this, Paul, aren't we?
Yeah. That would be nice, because we have, there are, concerns over that calculation.
And we're not going to cover that calculation now, because there is an entire hour's worth of podcasting just on that calculation and the whole how can you calculate madness. And I will call it madness, and that's my personal opinion. Someone has put, Sean has put, the importance of live testing needs more emphasis, as do methods of doing so safely. Absolutely. If you can't understand the safety implications, should you really be doing it? Live testing can be okay if precautions are taken from Sean Evans, appropriate, yes, GS38, Art Flash COVID, live working PPE, etc. I like live testing, as at no point with the minimum test 7671 do you prove continuity of the neutral. Well, Dave's done a whole webinar on the hidden test 7671. That's how I was taught. Evidently, we've just seems to have got rid of tests over the years. That just shows my lack of CPD in that regards. What's it? Would help flagging absence of the neutrals during testing. You could call PFC at circuit end of line. Yes, don't disagree. Proper test has to be superior. Hang on. Paul Brewerton has said proper test has to be superior to calculated. Yes, I think the big firms just want to calculate to save time and effort and cut costs. I went for a job interview about 20 years ago with a company, and all they did was send people out to get ZSs, and they had an entire office of about 20 ladies who were doing all the mathematical calculations, which means a lot of these installations are never really properly tested after initial verification. And in them days, there wasn't initial verification. It was inspection and testing.
Yeah.
And they were doing it 20 years ago.
And it's important to remember, if you're doing any ICR, you don't even start with the testing. It's all about that inspection. It's all about that discussion with the client, understanding if there's been a difference or a change of utilization or growth or anything like that. The stuff that we've covered tonight is applicable if you're doing an EICR, because all of these things can change and all this can have detrimental effects. You know, so, we said on the previous podcast, there have been times where I've gone to EICRs and I've not even got the testers out of the wagon, because by the time I've gone through a little bit of discussions, a little bit of visual inspection, there's the point of, there's no point at that point.
So Joseph Jenkins, Joey, to satisfy EAWR Reg 4.1 and 5, should verification of accumulation of earth leakage be a minimum requirement in 7671 Part 6? My opinion is yes. I hope it will appear in future editions.
It's just a case of knowing on behalf of what the client is going to connect into the system, so we can then quantify the value. But obviously, we need to have access to that quantity. We found one manufacturer has given us a good reference, but this again is we need data that we don't have great access to.
Paul, you were going
for our
say.
design.
I mean, it should be, but the problem you have there is let's stick with it. Let's stick with a domestic installation. I mean, you don't know what the client's going to come and plug in, do you? You know,
like a new coffee machine.
You can. If you've got an installation that's full of fixed loads, or if you've got a lot of fixed loads in an installation, you can get the data on that, and you can do that calculation. But as soon as you start bringing socket outlets into it, you've got 200 employees. They're going to 100 of them going to bring in a phone charger and plug it in every day to save them charging their phones at home, because they can steal the electricity at work rather than use their own electricity at home. 100 phone chargers at even 0.1 of a milliamp per leakage per charger.
That's up, doesn't it?
Yeah, I know a lot of them are double insulated. I'm just using that as a.
I think the rise of clamp meters is coming. I think they're quite handy for figuring out installation, and not that I'm throwing away, because everybody seems to be pulling at the threads of all our future podcasts. But I think we are doing one on this subject in a little bit more detail anyway, because we have read the. If I can find it, it's buried in these books somewhere. The Irish regulations, which do actually
10101.
Oh, this one.
Yeah.
Which do actually require the electrical contractor and installer to know what the connected system is, amongst other things. But I'm not giving away that webinar, because that's a webinar where we're going to highlight the 20 key changes between the UK and the Irish regs, which is the next one I'm working on. Funnily enough, after part 2, this will be the Irish regs one, unless we're doing the electrical installations in furniture one, Dave. I don't know.
Could do. But in the domestic sector, there's going to be some change when we have maybe another amendment or another on-site guide release, where they're going to start saying in kitchens we would recommend, X, Y, Z final circuits to minimize the numbers. Maybe 2 or 3 sockets per RCD or RCBO. As a way to try and achieve selectivity here, or the division of installation under 314, because you can't just have a kitchen ring final circuit and have this assumption that 9 milliamp will not be exceeded at that point for one single RCBO.
Yeah, this whole idea of this like dual RCD consuming unit is really totally obsolete now.
Yeah,
even in installations you get now, if you actually get a clamp meter that does milliamp range, if you actually check what's on a lot of these, a lot of the time it's way over the 9 milliamps, and you don't actually need that much stuff plugged in for it. So eventually we're going to have a lot more circuits, particularly for things like kitchens, where you've got your washing machines and all kinds of other stuff, which by design have, in many cases, several milliamps each.
Well,
so you get 2 or 3 of those, yeah, you're straight away over the 9 milliamps.
John, I think we were researching, do you remember that suite of standards that defined all the milliamp leakage of certain equipment? I think cookers and showers were 10 milliamps.
Yeah. So
See,
one circuit, one device in the case of those. So.
Yeah, I remember seeing a forum or a thread on this once before, where they said, well, maybe the answer is to have, radial circuits with the socket outlets having RCDs on them, a bit like they would in the receptacles in the US. But that comes to the issue that we have, which I don't want to start talking about now, about RCDs to, is it 7288, Paul?
The socket outlet ones.
Yeah, socket outlet RCDs, and what we assume they can or cannot achieve. But it might be that we divide systems down even further down that point. Who knows where things will go?
That's a good point as well, because in the I think it's the chat, there is talk about undervoltage, and I was saying to you guys the other night when we were talking literally about undervoltage, where there was RCDs. I remember BS4293 RCDs that when the voltage dropped out, they were active and they would trip out, and you would have to go and actively reset them. But the passive ones would cope and just come back on if there was a loss of power. That still happens, but apparently it's more in the plug tops now and the sockets rather than in the
it's we hit 2 hours. It's probably a good idea that we wrap this up. These guys are just hearing what we kind of just wumble about anyway.
Indeed.
Right. Any other questions? Is that everything?
Any other questions or bits and bobs? Can anyone see anything in the chat?
Mark's added that class 1 and 2 appliances can have a maximum 5 milliamp leakage easily and still pass according to the 5th edition code of practice, which I've had to just buy 10 copies of.
Mark Holmes needs to come on these podcasts.
Yeah,
and just give us a vent. Tell us what he's thinking.
All right. So what's next one's next Tuesday?
Yeah, we're going to carry this on all the way through to the end of chapter 13.
It's already on the site to register if you've not registered for it yet.
Please register. This will go on the Tube of You at some point. And just before we go, 2 things. One, congratulations, Mr. Skirm, on his IET fellowship.
Oh yes, well done.
And huge love and respect live, because this man has cancer, and there is a very long E5 podcast coming out where he tells his entire story to date. So it's worth listening to and hearing.
That'll be out very soon.
And that's it, really.
Yeah, thank you for everyone for coming in, taking part. Thank you for this one, Paul, bringing this subject in, and thank you, John and Paul, for coming on board. And it's just great when you can just open debate these things with your mates.
Other thing, if anybody wants a copy of this, the full version after the second part, just let us know and I'll email it to you. The PowerPoint, that is.
Dex has already asked.
Dex has already asked for that.
Oh no, he can sod off, not Dex. No, but anybody else but Dex can have a copy of it.
I think you must have had some questions that I didn't see, Paul, in that, because they weren't in the chat that I've got here. So doesn't matter.
Oh no, there's 2, isn't there? There's a Q&A box and a chat. Sorry, they're on both sides.
No, I had
the
the Q&A box, but
some of these are in the chat.
Yeah, I got that.
Right, okay. We'll do this again next Tuesday. Thank you everyone for watching and listening and on YouTubing and putting nice comments down and not negative, and peace and love. We'll see you next week.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Hey.
Bye.
Bye.
Remember which button to press, mate?
No, I don't.
Well, I can leave, but you've got to close this thing.
Oh, God. Hang on. Bye, everyone, I think.
Bye. I think that's worked.
Does that work?
I don't know.
The screen seems to have changed.
You've changed the screen. If you're still here, guys, say hello. Oh. No, yeah, you're still here. Mr. Berridge is still. Yeah, you've not closed the thing yet, mate. You've just closed your presentation.
It's gone off the screen. I don't know where it's gone. There's too many boxes. Hang on, I need to close all my boxes. Sorry. Where's the screen? There it is. End.
End for all. Bye.
Bye.